The clock on the wall showed 9:30 p.m. when Lisa finally got a moment to catch her breath. Her feet were killing her after running around Romano's restaurant for the past 10 hours straight. She had started her shift at 11 a.m., and the dinner rush had been absolutely crazy tonight. Every table was full and the kitchen was backed up with orders. Lisa grabbed a clean towel and wiped the sweat from her forehead. At 28 years old, she never imagined her life would look like this. Working double shifts at an upscale Italian restaurant wasn't exactly the dream she had growing up. But life had a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expected them. She glanced at the small photo tucked into her apron pocket. Her 7-year-old daughter Mia smiled back at her from the picture. That little girl was the reason Lisa pushed herself to work these long hours. The medical bills were piling up faster than she could pay them, and every dollar mattered. The restaurant was starting to quiet down a bit. Most of the dinner crowd had left, but there were still a few tables with customers finishing their meals. Lisa looked around and noticed an older gentleman sitting alone at table 7. He had been there for about an hour now, but something about him seemed different from the usual wealthy customers who came to Romano's. The man appeared to be in his early 60s with silver hair neatly combed back and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His suit looked expensive, probably worth more than Lisa made in 3 months. A gold watch caught the light as he moved his hand to take a sip of wine. But despite his obvious wealth, he didn't have that arrogant attitude that many rich customers displayed. What really caught Lisa's attention was how he kept looking at the grand piano in the corner of the restaurant. The beautiful black instrument had been sitting there collecting dust for years. She had heard from other staff members that it once belonged to the owner's grandmother, but nobody had played it in ages. Most customers didn't even notice it anymore. Lisa straightened her uniform and walked over to table 7. Her left hand was bandaged where she had burned herself on a hot pan earlier in the kitchen. The pain had been bothering her all evening, but she couldn't afford to take time off work. "Good evening, sir. I'm so sorry to keep you waiting. How are you enjoying your meal tonight?" she asked, with a tired but genuine smile. The gentleman looked up at her with warm eyes. "Please don't apologize. I can see how hard you've been working tonight. The service here is excellent and the food is wonderful." His voice was gentle and kind, not demanding like so many other wealthy customers. Lisa felt herself relax a little. "Duck. You so much, sir. That really means a lot. Can I get you anything else? Maybe some coffee or dessert?" "Actually, I'd love to hear about that piano over there," he said, pointing toward the corner. "Does anyone ever play it?" Lisa followed his gaze to the dusty instrument. "Oh, that old thing." "No, sir. It's been sitting there for years. I think it belonged to Mr. Romano's grandmother, but it's probably not even in tune anymore." The man's expression grew thoughtful. "That's a shame. Music has a way of bringing life to a place, don't you think?" There was something wistful in his voice that made Lisa curious. "Are you a musician, sir?" "Not really, but my late wife was. She used to play beautifully." His eyes grew distant for a moment. "She always said that music could heal hearts and change lives." Lisa felt a pang of sympathy. She could hear the love and loss in his voice. "I'm sorry for your loss, sir. She sounds like she was a wonderful woman." "She was," he said softly. "Elena was the most talented person I ever knew. She could make that piano sing in ways that would bring tears to your eyes." As they talked, Lisa found herself drawn into the conversation. There was something about this man that made her feel comfortable, like she was talking to a grandfather rather than just another customer. "What about you?" he asked suddenly. "Do you have any hidden talents?" Lisa laughed, but there was a hint of sadness in it. "Me? No, sir. I'm just a waitress trying to make ends meet. Nothing special about that." But the man studied her face carefully, as if he could see something she was hiding. "I don't believe that for a second. Everyone has something special inside them. Sometimes it just takes the right moment to bring it out." Before Lisa could respond, another customer at table 3 started waving his hand impatiently. She sighed and excused herself to take care of him. The man at table 3 was everything the gentleman at table 7 wasn't: rude, demanding, and treating her like she was invisible. After dealing with the difficult customer, Lisa returned to check on the kind gentleman. She noticed he had been watching her handle the situation with grace and patience, even when the other man was being unreasonable. "You handled that very well," he said when she approached. "Not everyone would have kept their composure like that." Lisa shrugged. "You learn to deal with all kinds of people in this job. Some days are harder than others, but I need this work. May I ask why you work such long hours? It's none of my business, but you seem exhausted." For a moment, Lisa hesitated. She usually didn't share personal information with customers, but something about this man made her want to open up. "My daughter," she said quietly. "She's been sick, and the medical bills are really expensive. Insurance doesn't cover everything, and I'm doing this on my own." The man's expression grew even more compassionate. "That must be incredibly difficult. How old is your daughter?" "She's 7, the sweetest little girl you've ever met." Lisa's face lit up despite her exhaustion. "She's getting better, but the treatments cost so much money. That's why I work double shifts whenever I can." "What's wrong with her, if you don't mind me asking?" "She has a rare blood disorder. It's treatable, but the medicine is really expensive. Sometimes I wonder how I'm going to keep up with all the bills." The gentleman nodded thoughtfully. "Children are precious gifts. A parent will do anything for their child." "Exactly. She's my whole world. I'd work 3 jobs if I had to." As the evening continued, Lisa found herself stopping by table 7 more often than necessary. The gentleman was such a pleasant change from the usual demanding customers. He asked about her daughter, listened to her stories, and seemed genuinely interested in her life. Around 10 p.m., most of the other customers had left. The restaurant was much quieter now, and Lisa could hear the soft jazz music playing through the speakers. The gentleman had ordered dessert and was taking his time, seeming to enjoy the peaceful atmosphere. Lisa was cleaning nearby tables when she heard him speak again. "That piano really is beautiful, even covered in dust," he said, looking at the instrument again. "It's such a waste to let it sit there silent." "I know what you mean," Lisa replied. "Sometimes I wonder what it would sound like if someone actually played it." The man smiled mysteriously. "Maybe someday someone will." Little did Lisa know that this simple conversation with a kind stranger was about to change her life in ways she never could have imagined. The night was still young, and the most surprising part was yet to come. As the clock struck 10:15 p.m., Lisa was wiping down the last few tables when she noticed the gentleman at table 7 was still there. Most customers would have left by now, but he seemed perfectly content sitting alone with his coffee and dessert. She had been stealing glances at him throughout the evening, and every time she looked over, he was either watching her work or staring thoughtfully at that old piano. There was something different about tonight. Maybe it was because the restaurant was so quiet now, or maybe it was because this stranger had been so kind to her when she really needed it. Lisa had dealt with hundreds of wealthy customers over the years, and most of them barely acknowledged she existed. But this man was different. He actually listened when she spoke and seemed to care about her answers. Lisa walked over to his table with a fresh pot of coffee. "Would you like a refill, sir? I know it's getting late, so please don't feel like you have to stay if you have somewhere to be." The gentleman smiled and held up his cup. "I'd love some more coffee, thank you. And please call me Robert. You've been taking such good care of me tonight." "Thank you, Mr. Robert. I really appreciate how patient you've been. Some customers get upset when service is slow during busy nights like this." Robert shook his head. "I've been watching you work all evening, and I'm impressed. You handle everything with such grace even when people are rude to you. That takes real character." Lisa felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. It had been a long time since anyone had said something so nice about her work. Most days she felt invisible and unimportant. "That's very kind of you to say. I just try to do my best, you know. Every job matters, even if it's just serving food." "Every job does matter," Robert agreed. "But I have a feeling you're capable of much more than just serving food." There was something in his tone that made Lisa look at him more carefully. His eyes had a knowing look, as if he could see something she was hiding. "What do you mean?" she asked curiously. Instead of answering directly, Robert stood up and walked over to the piano. Lisa followed him, wondering what he was doing. He ran his hand along the dusty surface of the instrument, and she could see sadness in his expression. "This is a Steinway grand piano," he said quietly. "Probably worth about $50,000, maybe more. It's a crime to let something this beautiful sit here unplayed." Lisa's eyes widened. She had no idea the old piano was worth so much money. $50,000, really? At least. These instruments are works of art. They're meant to create music, not collect dust. Robert turned to look at her. "Have you ever wondered what it would sound like?" "All the time," Lisa admitted. "Sometimes when I'm cleaning this area, I imagine what it would be like if someone actually played it. The restaurant would probably sound completely different." Robert nodded thoughtfully. Then he did something that completely caught Lisa off guard. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. From it, he took out what looked like a business card and a folded piece of paper. "Lisa, I want to make you an offer," he said, his voice suddenly more serious. "An offer? What kind of offer?" Robert handed her the business card. Lisa looked at it and gasped. The card was simple but elegant, with gold lettering that read, "Robert Sterling, Sterling Real Estate Development," and below that, "Net worth, $200 million." And Lisa stared at the card, then at Robert, then back at the card. Her hands were shaking slightly. You're really worth $200 million? "Money is just numbers on paper," Robert said gently. "What matters is what you do with it. And right now I want to do something that might change your life." Lisa felt like she was in a dream. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. "I don't understand. What are you talking about?" Robert pointed to the piano. "I want you to play this piano for me." Lisa laughed nervously. "Mr. Sterling, I told you I'm just a waitress. I don't know how to play piano." But Robert wasn't smiling. He was completely serious. "Lisa, I've been watching you all evening. The way you move, the way you listen to music, the way your fingers tap along to the rhythm when you think no one is looking. You're not just a waitress." Lisa felt her heart start beating faster. How could he have noticed those things? She thought she had hidden that part of herself so well. I really don't know what you're talking about." Robert unfolded the piece of paper he had taken from his wallet. It was a check already made out to Lisa Thompson. The amount line was blank. "If you can play something beautiful on this piano, I will give you $10,000. Right here, right now." Lisa stared at the check in disbelief. $10,000. That was more money than she made in 6 months. It would cover Mia's medical bills for the next 3 treatments. "You're joking, right?" "This has to be some kind of joke. I've never been more serious about anything in my life." By now, the few remaining customers in the restaurant had started to notice what was happening. The couple at table 12 was whispering and pointing in their direction. Even Tony, the busboy, had stopped clearing tables to watch. "Mr. Sterling, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I can't take your money. That wouldn't be right." "It's not charity," Robert said firmly. "It's payment for a performance. If you can't play, then you don't get paid. But if you can..." He paused and looked directly into her eyes. "If you can play something beautiful, then you'll have earned every penny." Lisa felt tears starting to form in her eyes. "But what if I can't? What if I disappoint you?" "Then nothing changes. You go back to work, and I finish my coffee. No harm done." The restaurant had gotten very quiet. Even the kitchen staff had noticed something unusual was happening. Maria, the other waitress working tonight, came over to see what was going on. "Everything okay over here?" Maria asked, looking confused. "This gentleman wants Lisa to play the piano," Tony whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Suddenly, it felt like everyone in the restaurant was staring at them. Lisa felt her face burning with embarrassment. She wanted to run and hide, but something about Robert's kind expression kept her there. "I haven't played in years," she whispered, so quietly that only Robert could hear her. "But you have played before," he said. It wasn't a question. Lisa closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The secret she had been hiding for so long was threatening to come out. She looked at the piano, then at the check in Robert's hand. then at the photo of Mia in her apron pocket. $10,000 would change everything for her daughter. But could she really do this? Could she sit at that piano in front of all these people and remember how to play after all these years? "Why are you doing this?" she asked Robert. "Because sometimes we all need someone to believe in us," he replied softly. "And because I have a feeling you're going to surprise everyone in this room tonight, including yourself." Lisa looked around at all the faces watching her. Some looked curious, others skeptical. She could almost hear them thinking that this was just a poor waitress who was about to embarrass herself. But then she looked at Robert's encouraging smile and felt something stirring inside her. Something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. "If I try this and fail, will you promise not to feel sorry for me?" she asked. "I promise. But Lisa, I don't think you're going to fail." With trembling hands, Lisa reached out and touched the piano keys for the first time in over 2 years. They were dusty and cold, but they felt familiar under her fingertips. The moment that would change everything was about to begin. Amy's hands were shaking so badly she could barely touch the piano keys. The entire restaurant felt like it was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. She could feel everyone's eyes on her. Vincent, Rosa, Diego, the couple, at table 12. Even the cook who had peeked out from the kitchen to see what all the commotion was about. Her fingers hovered over the dusty keys, and suddenly all the memories came flooding back. She remembered being 6 years old, sitting on a phone book so she could reach the pedals of her grandmother's old upright piano. She remembered her first recital at age 8, wearing a white dress with tiny blue flowers. She remembered the acceptance letter to the music conservatory that had changed everything. "I can't do this," Amy whispered, pulling her hands back as if the keys had burned her. Vincent stepped closer, his voice gentle and encouraging. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Amy felt tears starting to well up in her eyes. The secret she had been carrying for so long felt like it was about to burst out of her chest. She looked around at all the curious faces staring at her, and suddenly she couldn't hold it in anymore. "You want to know the truth?" she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "The truth is that I used to be a pianist. Not just someone who could play a few songs, but a real pianist. I graduated from the Manhattan Music Conservatory 8 years ago with honors." The restaurant got even quieter, if that was possible. Rosa's mouth fell open in shock. Diego stopped wiping the table he was cleaning and stared at Amy like he was seeing her for the first time. "I had dreams," Amy continued, the words pouring out of her now, like water through a broken dam. "Big dreams. I was going to perform at Carnegie Hall someday. I was going to record albums and tour around the world. I thought my life was all planned out." Vincent listened intently, his eyes full of compassion. "What happened?" Amy wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying not to smudge her makeup. "Life happened. My husband David and I got married right after I graduated. He was so supportive of my music career. He worked 2 jobs so I could practice and audition for orchestras. We were happy, you know? Really happy." She paused and looked down at her wedding ring, which she still wore even though it had been 3 years since David passed away. Then Sophie was born, and everything was perfect for a while. David was such a good father, and I was starting to get some small gigs with local orchestras. Nothing huge, but it was a start. We thought we had all the time in the world to build our dreams. Vincent could see where this story was going, and his expression grew even more gentle. Something went wrong. David got sick when Sophie was 2 years old. Cancer. It came out of nowhere and spread so fast that the doctors said there wasn't much they could do. We tried everything. Chemotherapy, radiation, experimental treatments. The medical bills started piling up faster than we could pay them. Amy had to stop talking for a moment, because the memories were too painful. She remembered sitting in hospital, waiting rooms for hours, holding David's hand while he slept, practicing scales on a silent keyboard app on her phone just to keep her fingers moving. "I had to sell my piano first," she continued. "It was a beautiful Yamaha Grand that my grandmother had left me. It broke my heart to let it go, but we needed the money for treatments. Then I had to quit performing because David needed someone to take care of him and Sophie." Rosa had tears in her eyes now, too. She had worked with Amy for over a year and never knew any of this. "Amy, I had no idea. I didn't want anyone to know," Amy said softly. "It's easier to just be a waitress than to be a failed musician." After David died, the medical bills didn't go away. If anything, they got worse. Sophie started having health problems too. She inherited a rare blood disorder from David's side of the family. "The treatments she needs are so expensive," Vincent reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, offering it to Amy. "How long has it been since you've played?" 2 years, Amy said, accepting the handkerchief gratefully. "I used to sneak into the hotel lobby downtown sometimes, when they had their piano out for special events. I would wait until no one was around and play for just a few minutes. But I always felt like I was stealing something that wasn't mine anymore." She looked at the piano in front of her, and for a moment, her expression changed. There was longing in her eyes, like someone who had been starving looking at a feast. "I dream about playing sometimes," she admitted. "I wake up and my fingers are moving like they're still on the keys. Sometimes I can still hear the music in my head, but I don't have anywhere to let it out." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, clearly moved by Amy's story. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "My wife Elena would have loved you. She always said that real musicians don't lose their gift just because they can't practice. She believed that music lives in your soul, not just in your fingers." "Your wife sounds like she was very wise," Amy said. "She was. She grew up poor, just like you. Her family couldn't afford piano lessons, so she taught herself to play on an old keyboard at her church. By the time I met her, she was playing at weddings and small events to help support her family. She never got the big break she deserved, but she never stopped believing that music could change lives." Vincent walked over to the piano and lifted the lid, revealing the beautiful black and white keys underneath. "Elena died 2 years ago, and I've been looking for a way to honor her memory ever since. I think this might be it." Amy stared at the piano keys, and suddenly she felt something she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just hope. It was hunger. A deep, aching need to touch those keys and make music again. "The thing is," she said quietly, "I'm scared. What if I've forgotten how to play? What if my fingers don't remember? What if I sit down and nothing beautiful comes out?" "Then you'll be exactly where you are right now," Vincent said simply. "But what if something beautiful does come out? What if you sit down and remember who you really are?" By now, even more people had gathered to watch. Mr. Romano, the owner of the restaurant, had come out of his office to see what was causing all the commotion. A few customers from the bar area had wandered over, drawn by the unusual scene. Amy looked around at all the faces watching her. Some looked skeptical, like they didn't believe a waitress could really be a trained pianist. Others looked curious and hopeful, but Vincent's face showed only encouragement and belief. "If I do this," Amy said slowly, "and if I actually remember how to play, what happens then? You give me the money and I go back to serving tables?" Vincent smiled mysteriously. "Let's just focus on the music first. Everything else can wait." Amy took a deep breath and walked over to the piano bench. She dusted it off with her apron and slowly sat down. The bench was the perfect height, and suddenly she felt like she was coming home after a long journey. She placed her hands on the keys but didn't press down yet. "I used to play this piece called Clair de Lune by Debussy. It was David's favorite. I played it at our wedding, and I played it for him in the hospital near the end." "That sounds perfect," Vincent said softly. Amy closed her eyes and let the memory of the music fill her mind. She could almost hear David's voice encouraging her, telling her she could do anything she set her mind to. She thought about Sophie, at home with the babysitter, sleeping peacefully and trusting that her mother would find a way to take care of everything. "Okay," she whispered to herself. "Here goes nothing." The moment that would change everything was about to begin. Amy sat at the piano bench, her hands trembling as they hovered over the keys. The restaurant had become so quiet that she could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Everyone was watching her. Vincent with his encouraging smile, Rosa with tears already forming in her eyes, Diego holding his breath, and even strangers who had stopped their conversations to witness what was about to happen. She pressed down on middle C, and the sound rang out clear and true through the silent restaurant. The piano was surprisingly well tuned for an instrument that hadn't been played in years. The single note seemed to hang in the air like a promise, and Amy felt something deep inside her chest begin to stir. "It's been so long," she whispered to herself, pressing another key, then another. The simple notes felt foreign under her fingers, at first like trying to remember a language she used to speak fluently. Vincent stepped closer, his voice gentle and encouraging. "Take your time, there's no rush." Amy closed her eyes and tried to remember the opening of Clair de Lune. She could hear David's voice in her memory, humming along as she used to play it on quiet Sunday mornings. The melody was still there, buried deep in her mind and heart, waiting to be set free. She placed her right hand on the keys and began the gentle, flowing opening phrase. The first few notes came out hesitant and uncertain, like someone learning to walk again after a long illness. But as the familiar melody began to emerge, something magical started to happen. Her left hand joined in, adding the soft bass notes that gave the piece its dreamy, floating quality. The years of training at the conservatory hadn't disappeared. They had just been sleeping, waiting for this moment to wake up. Her fingers began to remember their positions. Her wrists relaxed into the proper curve, and her shoulders dropped as the tension started to leave her body. The opening phrase of Clair de Lune filled the restaurant like moonlight spilling through a window. It was soft and delicate, but there was something hauntingly beautiful about it that made everyone in the room stop whatever they were doing and listen. Rosa had put down the glasses she was drying and was staring at Amy with her mouth slightly open. She had worked alongside Amy for over a year, serving tables and dealing with difficult customers, and she had never imagined that her quiet coworker could create something so beautiful. Diego had completely forgotten about clearing tables. He stood frozen with a tray in his hands, listening to music that seemed to transport him to another world. Even the cook had come out of the kitchen and was leaning against the doorframe, his usual gruff expression replaced by wonder. As Amy continued to play, the music began to flow more naturally. Her fingers found their confidence, and the hesitation disappeared. The melody rose and fell like waves on a gentle shore, and she could feel years of suppressed emotion pouring out through the keys. She thought about David lying in the hospital bed, squeezing her hand as she hummed this same melody to help him fall asleep during those long, difficult nights. She thought about Sophie at home, trusting that her mother would somehow find a way to pay for the treatment she needed. She thought about all the dreams she had given up and all the music that had been trapped inside her for so long. The middle section of the piece arrived, where the melody becomes more passionate and intense. Amy's playing grew stronger and more confident, her whole body swaying slightly with the rhythm. The piano seemed to come alive under her touch, as if it had been waiting all these years for someone who truly understood how to make it sing. Vincent watched with tears streaming down his face. He thought about his wife Elena, who had always believed that real talent could never be destroyed, only hidden. He could almost feel her presence in the room, nodding with approval at the music that was filling the space. The couple at table 12 had stopped eating entirely and were holding hands, completely mesmerized by the performance. An elderly man who had been reading a newspaper at the bar had folded it up and turned his full attention to Amy. His eyes closed as he let the music wash over him. As the piece moved toward its climax, Amy's playing became even more expressive. She wasn't just pressing keys anymore, she was telling a story. Every note carried the weight of her experiences. Every phrase spoke of love and loss and hope and survival. The music filled not just the restaurant but seemed to reach into the hearts of everyone listening. A few more people had wandered in from the street, drawn by the haunting melody drifting through the open windows. They stood quietly near the entrance, not wanting to disturb whatever was happening but unable to leave. The final section of Clair de Lune is where the melody returns to its gentle, peaceful beginning. But now it carries all the emotion and experience of the journey that came before. Amy played these closing phrases with a tenderness that brought tears to nearly everyone in the room. As she approached the final notes, she thought about this moment, and how it felt like coming back to life after being asleep for years. Her fingers caressed the keys with the same love she had felt when she first learned this piece as a young student, but now that love was deeper and more precious because she knew how easily it could be lost. The last chord hung in the air for what seemed like forever. Amy kept her hands on the keys even after the sound had faded, afraid that if she moved, the spell would be broken, and she would wake up from this impossible dream. The silence that followed was unlike anything anyone in the restaurant had ever experienced. It wasn't empty silence, and it was full of emotion and wonder and the lingering presence of something beautiful that had just touched all their lives. Vincent was the first to move. He began clapping slowly, and the sound seemed to break the spell that had held everyone frozen. One by one, the others joined in until the entire restaurant was filled with thunderous applause. Rosa was crying openly now, clapping so hard, her hands were turning red. Amy, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in my life. Diego had set down his tray and was applauding with enthusiasm. I had no idea. I mean, I knew you were special, but this... The elderly man from the bar had stood up and was applauding with dignity and respect, the kind of applause reserved for truly great performances. The couple at table 12 were both wiping their eyes, still holding hands and looking at Amy, like she had just performed a miracle. But it was Vincent's reaction that surprised Amy the most. The millionaire who had challenged her to play was standing with tears streaming down his face, applauding not just with his hands but with his whole heart. When he finally stopped clapping, he walked over to the piano and placed his hand gently on Amy's shoulder. Elena would have loved that, he said softly. That wasn't just playing. That was pure music from the soul. Amy looked up at him, her own face wet with tears. I had forgotten what it felt like. I had forgotten who I used to be. You didn't forget, Vincent said with a smile. You just needed someone to remind you that it was still there. The applause continued for several more minutes, and Amy sat at the piano, overwhelmed by the response. She had expected to feel embarrassed or nervous, but instead she felt alive in a way she hadn't experienced in years. Little did she know that this was only the beginning of the most incredible night of her life. As the applause finally began to die down, Amy sat at the piano in a daze. She couldn't believe what had just happened. For the first time in years, she felt like herself again. Not just a struggling waitress, but a real musician. The feeling was almost overwhelming, like coming up for air after being underwater for too long. Vincent walked over to where she was sitting and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. Amy, that was extraordinary. I haven't heard anything that beautiful since Elena used to play for me. Amy looked up at him with tears still streaming down her face. Thank you for making me do this. I had forgotten how much I missed it. But Vincent wasn't finished. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the check he had shown her earlier. With a pen from his shirt pocket, he wrote in the amount line. But instead of writing $10,000 like he had promised, he wrote something that made Amy's eyes go wide with shock. $50,000, she whispered, staring at the check in disbelief. But you said $10,000. Vincent smiled warmly. I said I would give you $10,000 if you could play something beautiful. What you just did was far beyond beautiful. That was a work of art. Amy's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the check. $50,000 was more money than she had seen in her entire life. It would cover Sophie's medical treatments for the next 2 years, maybe longer. I can't accept this, she said, trying to hand the check back to him. It's too much money. But Vincent gently pushed her hand away. Amy, this isn't charity. This is an investment. You see, I didn't just come here tonight by accident. I've been looking for someone like you for a very long time. Someone like me? I don't understand. Vincent pulled out another chair and sat down next to the piano so he could look directly at her. 2 years ago, when Elena died, she made me promise her something. She wanted me to use part of our money to help talented musicians who had been forced to give up their dreams because of circumstances beyond their control. Amy listened carefully, still not quite believing this was really happening. Elena grew up poor, and she knew how hard it was to pursue music when you're struggling just to survive. She always said that some of the most gifted musicians in the world were probably working regular jobs somewhere, Their talents hidden because they couldn't afford to chase their dreams. So you've been looking for people like that? Exactly. I visited dozens of restaurants, coffee shops, and hotels over the past 2 years, hoping to find someone with real talent who just needed a chance. And tonight, I found you, Vincent. Reached into his briefcase, which Amy hadn't noticed he had brought with him, and pulled out a folder of papers. Amy, I want to offer you something that could change your life completely. I'm starting a foundation called the Elena Morrison Music Foundation. It's designed to help talented musicians get back on their feet and pursue their careers again. Amy's heart started beating faster. What kind of help? Full financial support for you and Sophie while you rebuild your music career. We'll pay for your living expenses, Sophie's medical treatments, private lessons with top instructors, and auditions with major orchestras. Everything you need to get back to where you belong. Amy stared at him in complete shock. This couldn't be real. Things like this only happened in movies, not to struggling waitresses from small apartments. But why me? You just heard me play one piece. How do you know I'm good enough for something like that? Vincent's eyes twinkled with knowing. Amy, I didn't become worth $200 million by accident. I know talent when I see it. What you just played wasn't just technically perfect. It had soul. You made everyone in this room feel something real and deep. That's not something you can teach, that's a gift. Rosa had been listening from nearby, and she couldn't help but speak up. Amy, this is incredible. This is like winning the lottery. Diego nodded enthusiastically. You have to say yes, this is the chance of a lifetime. But Amy was still overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. This is all happening so fast. What would I have to do? Vincent opened the folder and showed her some papers. First, you'd work with the foundation as our lead music director. You'd help us find other talented musicians who need support, just like Elena wanted. The salary alone would be enough to support you and Sophie comfortably. And the music career part? We've already arranged for you to audition with the City Symphony Orchestra next month. Their conductor, Patricia Williams, is a friend of mine. She's always looking for exceptional pianists. Amy felt like she was dreaming. The City Symphony Orchestra was one of the most respected orchestras in the country. She had dreamed of auditioning with them since she was a teenager. There's more, Vincent continued. We want to sponsor your first solo album. We have connections with recording studios and music producers who specialize in classical music. If the orchestra audition goes well, we'd also like to book you for a solo concert next year. A solo concert? Amy could barely get the words out. At Carnegie Hall. The room went completely silent. Even the people who had gathered from the street to listen to the music stopped talking. Carnegie Hall was the most famous concert venue in the world. It was every classical musician's ultimate dream. Amy stood up from the piano bench, her legs feeling unsteady. This is too much, I can't. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail? Vincent stood up too and looked directly into her. Sir son, Amy, failure is staying where you are and never trying. Success is taking the chance to become who you're meant to be. He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo of a beautiful woman with kind eyes and graying hair sitting at a piano. This is Elena. She never got her big break, but she always believed that other people should get theirs. This foundation. Is her dream coming true, even though she's not here to see it? Amy looked at the photo and felt something deep in her heart. She thought about Sophie at home and about David, who had always encouraged her to follow her dreams. She thought about all the years she had spent hiding her talent, afraid to hope for something better. If I say yes, she said slowly, when would this all start? Tomorrow, if you want. We'll have lawyers draw up the contracts, arrange for Sophie's medical care to be transferred to the best specialists in the city, and get you set up with everything you need. Vincent paused and smiled. But first, there's something else I want to show you. He walked back to his briefcase and pulled out a set of keys. These are the keys to a practice studio downtown. It has a beautiful Steinway grand piano just like this one. It's yours to use whenever you want, for as long as you need it. Amy took the keys with trembling hands. Having a place to practice again felt almost as incredible as everything else that was happening. And there's one more thing. Vincent said, reaching into the briefcase one final time. He pulled out an envelope and handed it to Amy. Open it. Inside the envelope was a contract for a position as lead music director of the Elena Morrison Music Foundation, with a starting salary that was more than Amy had ever imagined earning. But attached to the contract was something even more amazing. A letter of introduction to the recording studio that had produced albums for some of the world's most famous classical musicians. "Vincent, I don't know how to thank you," Amy said, tears flowing freely now. "Don't thank me, thank Elena. And promise me that someday, when you're performing at Carnegie Hall, you'll dedicate a song to her memory." Amy nodded, unable to speak, through her tears. As the evening wound down and the last customers left the restaurant, Amy sat at the piano one more time. She played a soft, gentle melody, not a famous piece this time, but something she made up on the spot. It was a song of gratitude, of hope, and of new beginnings. 6 months later, Amy Chen performed her debut concert at Carnegie Hall. In the front row sat Vincent, Sophie, healthy and glowing, and an empty seat with a white rose in honor of Elena Morrison. The program that night included Claire de Lune and a new piece Amy had composed called The Waitress Who Remembered Her Dreams. Sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most broken hearts, and sometimes a single moment of courage can change everything.